everyone. Welcome to Higher Edification, a podcast featuring college presidents and other education leaders talking about the state of higher education and the challenges that we are currently facing in that space. Higher Edification is a production of Misericordia University in Pennsylvania, and I'm your host, Dan Myers. I'm the president of Misericordia in Pennsylvania. I'm also known as President Dan on TikTok. I'm joined today by Colleen Perry-Keith, who is the president of Goldey-Beacom, and we are so excited to have you on today, Colleen, because you and I have a very strange, deep history.
Yes, we do.
And I will say that I was just sitting at one of these NCAA conferences, and you came up to me and said, "Are you Dan Myers?" And I'm like, uh-oh. What does this person want? And and then you introduced yourself. And here's the deal, people. Colleen used to date the older brother of a guy that I was in a rock band with in 8th grade. Okay? All right, put all that together in your head for a second. And then she comes out of the blue at this conference and says, tells me about this connection. And here we are somehow from these little farm towns up in upstate New York, both having become college presidents. What in the world is that about? I mean, how does that happen? What a small world moment, Colleen.
You never would say anybody, you look at Altmar Parish, Williamstown, where I went to school, and then Pulaski, where you went to school, and nobody would think, it's Oswego County, New York, economically, pretty depressed, all of that. You wouldn't, not a high college going rate. So you wouldn't put two people coming out of those schools, you would think that maybe they'd go to college, but you wouldn't bank on it, and you wouldn't put us in these positions as a result of that. So
no, that's right.
It is pretty weird.
Yeah, well, we were talking ahead about a couple of things. And one of them was, just the kind of social mobility driver that higher education really is. And it's quite a story for both of us. I mean, I don't know what your parents did or what their history in that area was, but maybe you talk a little bit about that and how you got from there to college to graduate school, and eventually, I mean, this is your second college presidency too,
Third,
right? Third. Okay,
yeah.
Third.
Yeah, whenever the rent's due, I move.
Yeah, you're going to start challenging Gordon Gee for the championship here. You still got a lot of time left, so.
No, I'm kind of in the fourth quarter of my career now. So,
well, tell me a little bit about that trajectory and how did you get from there to here?
Yeah, I'm a first generation college kid. My mom was a teacher's aide in the APW school district. And by the time she retired from there, she was the library media aide. So she used to deal with all the technology stuff, but she was a high school graduate, graduated early from high school at 16 to marry my dad. And he graduated from high school and went into the Air Force, and then they came back to Parish, New York, and settled there and lived there, until they started downsizing, and then moving into like senior living or an apartment. But they were not college graduates, but they always instilled in us that education is a way to have a solid future, and they used to see that. They were both very, very bright people, and just kind of always saw that, but didn't really always understand about it. So my oldest brother went to Onondaga Community College, to OCC. My next brother is deaf. And so back then, when you're deaf, you are removed from the home, basically, and you go to like a residential school. So he went to the New York State School for the Deaf in Rome. And he did go to college, but that was kind of the trajectory from NYSSD. They really promoted that. And then all the rest of us, did some form of something post-secondary, but not always college. So I went to Lemoyne for a year until I couldn't afford it at the end of that year. Then I transferred to SUNY Binghamton, which now known as Binghamton University, and which was a lot less expensive. But I worked my way through college in newspapers. My dad worked at the Syracuse newspapers. He started as a printer that set hot type. So way back when they used to set, the letters in, and you see the printer's drawers now in antique shops, that's what he did. He set hot type when he started. But he was very bright, and the Syracuse newspapers recognized that and moved him into really when they were ready to computerize the newspaper. They sent him to Digital Equipment Corporation, DEC, I think it was in New Hampshire. And he learned this system and came back and led the way to computerize the Syracuse newspaper operation. So that's what he did.
Wow.
Yeah, very, really bright guy. He passed away in 2021. And so, and he was 89 and, just had, an interesting life starting from basically nothing, and just the power of his, native intelligence got him to where he was.
Yeah.
So he did, very well with that. And I then, I majored in political science, as did you.
Yeah.
Of all things, who would
We
think
were
that would be
tracing
like-
all these connections through little
Yeah.
parallel lives we lived. Yeah.
Yeah, your master's is from the same program at Ohio State that my doctorate is from,
Yeah,
all
yeah,
of that.
yeah.
So at one point in my career, I was married to my first husband, and he was in a doctoral program at Carnegie Mellon, and I was working in Pittsburgh. And I was working for Kelly Services, the temporary help company. And I was in the office for Kelly. And in Pittsburgh is where, there was the Carnegie Steel, and, all of the steel industry stuff was headquartered there. And this would have been in the early, I graduated early from SUNY. So I graduated in 83. So this would have been like 84, 85. And the steel industry was just changing over and starting to close down in this country and move overseas. And so a lot of these huge structures were no longer, supporting, they weren't doing anything. So people were out of work. So they were coming to places like Kelly Services to get a job. And here are union steel workers who are used to making $30, $40 an hour. And the best that we could do was light industrial work, which paid maybe minimum wage, maybe a little bit over minimum wage. And I, I couldn't help them. And it was so sad. And, these men who'd been working in steel mills their whole lives had nothing, and they're in tears. And I'm a huge empath. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, but it kind of energized me. And I thought to myself, I need to figure out how do I do something with this experience? And so I got to the point where I thought, you know what? I didn't have good guidance counseling in high school, and neither did any of these people. And so if I could impact at that level and maybe help people understand the importance of skills and transferable skills and education as a driver for economic mobility. I didn't know those words at the time, but that's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
And, so I wanted to go back and get a degree to do that. So I went to Pitt, since we were living in Pittsburgh, and I got a master's in educational counseling, and then never worked as a guidance counselor. We moved to Oklahoma, and I worked in a college. So I worked in the Guidance and Career Center at the time it was called Rogers State College. So it was a 2-year community college at that point. It's expanded its mission beyond that now. But I started working there, and then I moved from there to Ohio, and I worked for Ohio State for the regional campus in Marion.
Mhm.
And I managed the advising end of all the teacher ed majors there. And, I found that what happened was I would get picked up and put into something and said, okay, you got to make this work. Can you fix this? So that became my claim to fame, really. I could make things work and I could fix them. So one day at OSU Marion, the fellow who was running the prison program, because we had a prison education program at Marion Correctional Institute, he had been injured. And so the dean and the director of the campus said to me, we need somebody who can go out to the prison. Larry's not going to be able to do this maybe for a year. And so I'm like, oh, I'd never been to the prison before. I knew where it was, but that was about it. So I took over the prison program, made that started working, well. And I just picked up what Larry had been doing and kept moving on with it. But then that became the thing every place, with anything else there at the campus. Okay, let's give this to Colleen and see if she can fix this and make this work. Then in that process, I met a guy, John Mount, who was a vice president for student affairs at Ohio State University.
I know
John Mount's, yeah, he's a great guy. John and Ruth. Yeah. His grandchildren were from Marion, and his grandchildren were my advisees at OSU Marion. So I knew Dr. Mount, and he was just this, awesome guy. And he was really concerned about a couple of his grandchildren. So he would call. He would want to know how they were doing. And I would have to say, now, Dr. Mount, I can't tell you that. There's this pesky little rule called, FERPA. And can't tell you. But, and he'd be like, but I'm really hopeful. So then one day he called and he said, I'm a founding trustee of a graduate theological school in Delaware, Ohio. You probably know of it. And I'm thinking, no. So I thought he was talking about, the only seminary I knew was the Pontifical College Josephinum, which is on Route 23 in Worthington, Ohio. He's like, no, in Delaware. And I'm like, I don't even know where that is. He goes, right next to the Dornoch Golf Course. I said, oh, those really pretty brick buildings? He's like, yeah. I said, I thought that was the clubhouse for the golf course. He's like, no, it's a seminary. So he said, they're looking for an executive assistant to the president. And I think you'd be a really good one. So I said, well, I've been at Ohio State now for 8 years. The retirement system is kind of a ball and chain. You sort of want to stay and all that. Mm-hmm. And he said, I still think you ought to go talk about this. You need to go talk to them about this role. So I did, and then started working there. And I worked there for almost 12 years. But that's where I learned how not-for-profit private higher education runs and can run. Because I started as the executive assistant to the president, ended up as the executive vice president over the course of those dozen years. And everything outside the classroom was under my oversight, and everything inside the classroom was under the academic dean's oversight. So I had to learn how do you do everything? Like, how does the business office work? How does not-for-profit accounting work? How, all that. And then, but I worked very closely with the president. And one day he said, you really ought to be a college president. And I said, why would I want to do that? I see your life. I don't want to live your life. And he would laugh and he would say, you say that now, but you just wait. Well, he retired. And then I knew I needed to focus my career in some way. And I'm not an accountant. I don't have a background in finance or anything like that. So I knew I couldn't really be a chief financial officer or anything like that. I could probably be a VP for administration, but a lot of places don't have that. It's separate from finance. So I thought, okay, I'll refocus my career in fundraising because I had helped with campaigns and all that. So I then got hired by the Kappa Kappa Gamma Foundation, which was interesting because, not having been a Greek and gone through any Greek anything in school, I didn't know a lot about it. But, I went there, and then from there, I went to Ohio University and I worked as the executive director of that foundation. And then while I was there, the president from the seminary, who I had worked with, was doing some search consulting work with R.H. Perry. And he called me up one day. He said, there's this Methodist college. You understand the Methodist structure. And this was a school that was had been started as a mission of the church and was still considered a mission of the South Carolina Annual Conference. And he said, you have to consider this. And I'm like, I'm at OU now, and I'm back in the state higher ed system, and that retirement system is very enticing and all that.
Racking up your years. Yeah.
Yeah. And he said, it won't always be that way. And so he dropped off the materials and I just let him sit on the counter. And one day by this time I'm married to my second husband, and my second husband comes in one day and he's reading the materials, and I got home from work and he said, "You do realize this college is exactly you. You need to be at this college. This is where you want to go." I said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm thinking long term." And this was a guy who was born and raised in Ohio and had never lived outside of Ohio. I said, "Are you sure you'd want to move away?" And he said, "Please, I will never have that kind of experience unless we do it through you." So we did, and I went to Spartanburg Methodist, and that's how I became a college president. And I was there
Wow.
6 years, and then went to Pfeiffer University in North Carolina, and then Goldey-Beacom opened up, and I'd never heard of a Goldey-Beacom. So, it's kind of a weird name and all that. But the search consultant for Goldey knew me from just being around higher ed for a while. And she called and she said, "You told me never to bother you unless there was an opening for a stable institution that would put you in close proximity to your son and to your parents. And I've got the place." And I'm like, "No, you don't." She's like, "No, actually I do."
Uh-huh.
So she said, I'm going to send you this information. I'm going to send you a link. You need to look at this. So I did, and then was talking to my husband, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this would be an hour and a half from my son. My son is Tim. Be an hour and a half from Tim, and maybe 4.5 hours from my parents." So and my parents were older, and like my mom's now 90, and so you were at that point where it's like you've got responsibilities and things that you want to do. So it was this being at Goldey was the first time where the personal and the professional really came together in a good way for me. So that's how I got here.
So way back when the president of the seminary suggested to you should be a president someday, and you were like, "I don't want to do that." What were you seeing that you didn't like? And now that you're president, has that come true? Have you figured out how to deal with this? What are the goods and the bads of being a president these days? How's it? I mean, it must be working out okay since you're on number 3, but when you look back at what you were thinking then and how your experience has really been these 3 presidents.
It was more of the 24/7 nature of it. The fact that you are on all the time. You're always the president. Even when you go on vacation, you're still the president. And, there are still things you're going to have to keep in touch with and stay on top of and all of that. And I didn't really want that kind of life. I didn't want to feel like I'm always at work. But when I got to Spartanburg Methodist, and I got talking to the students, and I got talking to the people that love the place. And actually, today is Thursday, just yesterday, one of the most wonderful faculty members in the world, Kathy Can, she was a historian who taught at Spartanburg Methodist. She was on the search committee. I spent a lot of time talking with her. She was telling me the story of the founding of the college, and I just knew I fit there. And I thought, you know what, I want to go be a part of this place. And so I did. And that has been, that is the part that I don't like, the constant, 24/7 nature of it. I delegate really well. I don't micromanage, people do their jobs and that's great. And I don't need to be doing all their jobs, but you're still 24/7 all the time.
That's right. Yeah.
But, you look at the students and you look at like our story and how it's education that's your ticket out and your ticket to economic mobility. And, that I saw that at Spartanburg Methodist. I saw it at Pfeiffer, and I for sure see it here at Goldey.
For people who don't know Goldey-Beacom, could you just tell us a little bit about the school and what the main things you do? What's the thrust? What's the student body like?
Yeah.
That might help us appreciate what you were just saying about the mobility stuff.
We are 137 years old. And we were
Wow.
started in 1886 as a business college. We taught penmanship, business penmanship.
Good thing I didn't go there. I would have
Yeah.
flunked out for
Well,
sure.
when you think about it, I'm really into genealogy and all that with my cousin Margot. So, we're always going through old census records, and you always see the same handwriting in the census records. Everybody had the same handwriting. That's business penmanship. So it was taught so that until typewriters really were in use, sometimes you can't read people's handwriting. So penmanship was done a certain way so that you could read what people were writing. And then the Goldey-Beacom was actually, we started as Wilmington Commercial College by Harry Goldey. And Harry Goldey, in the 1890s, hired a guy named William Beacom. And Beacom was a penmanship guy. And the two of them, met at something. And so Goldey hires Beacom. He comes here and they, Harry's the president and William's teaching. And then as our history has always followed the history of office machinery, basically. So typewriters came more into vogue. We were heavy into typewriting contests and all that kind of stuff. And shorthand came along. And there were two methods of shorthand. There was the Gregg method and there was the Pittman method. And Beacom was a Gregg guy and Goldey was a Pittman guy. And the two were teaching the two different styles of shorthand and, mine's better than yours, that sort of thing. They got into arguments and Beacom finally one day said, screw this, I'm out of here. And he left, took all his toys with him, and he went 2 blocks down the street and started his own college. So there was Goldey College and Beacom College that competed against each other for 50 years.
Over shorthand.
Over shorthand. Yeah. Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And then in the 1950s, early 1950s, both Beacom and Goldey are long gone. The two colleges decided to merge, and they were started as a for-profit. People, every once in a while, somebody will wander into my office with a stock certificate. Like, I have a Goldey stock certificate. So we were a for-profit institution up until 1969 when we applied for and got not-for-profit status, but merged the two schools. It became Goldey-Beacom. We became a not-for-profit and then started adding curriculum. So we were just business, and our tagline was, we're all business. And it did pretty well at that.
That's good.
So then we started adding English and criminal justice and, some majors that the leaders felt could lead to economic mobility. And that has been a big thing for us. But up until recently, we were categorized on the Carnegie scale as a specialty institution. So when I got here, I understand all of that kind of stuff, just given the kind of background that I have. So we started talking to, at the time it was at Indiana where all the rankings were, the office that did that was there. Mm-hmm. So we started saying, take a look at our graduates. We are not primarily a business institution. Psychology is our number one major now. And we have a master's in counseling psych. So, you need to take a look at that. So they changed our classification. We became a small master's 1. And all of a sudden, U.S. News and World Report and all the rankings are then looking at our data. And, there's a lot of controversy about all the rankings, and I get it. But we actually were named top, where there's a think tank out of DC called the Third Way, and we were in the top tier 1 of colleges ranked on economic mobility. So the number of our students who start and come here, get their education, and then they go out and make money that, is able to sustain themselves. And we're getting ranked on the things like that really matter and are really exciting. The college it's weird. We're small. We're about 1,300 students. And we're on 24 acres. We're an NCAA Division II college, which and very international. We've always had a strong international student focus. Myself and the previous president, and there was one other that were not international, but we had a president who was here for a long time, Mohammed Ilyas, and he had a lot of connections within Pakistan and all over. And so we have always had a very strong international presence. And that's what we really like, especially at the undergrad level, because you get, that focus in the classroom. So you've got domestic students with international students, and they're learning from each other. And usually international students come here as freshmen, and they tend to stay about 6 years. They stay and get a graduate degree as well. So it's been really neat, but it's a neat place. But what we did with that we used to have a huge graduate international presence. We made a lot of money during those times. There were some years when we might have a $10 million surplus or an $11 million surplus at the end of the year. What the board did was took that money and swept it into the endowment. And then the endowment has grown. And now our endowment's right around $190 million.
Wow.
And about all but 30 million of it is unrestricted. So that gives us, money, and I've got, money in reserves. So now when the world of higher ed is looking at enrollment downturns and, the demographic cliff and all that, I've got it all still comes back to your enrollment. You still have to have students in the classrooms because you got to live on your annual revenue. But I have some runway because I do have some reserves, and I do have, a strong endowment, most of which is unrestricted. So we decided a couple years ago, timing is everything. They had been in conversations before I got here about rolling the tuition back and like cutting it 50%, doing a whole tuition reset. So we decided to go ahead with that. We decided we would push ahead with it in the fall of 21, hoping that COVID would be over. It wasn't. So we never got that little bump that you usually get. But we then started really heavily focusing on marketing because we needed to tell our story. So right now we're running a little bit ahead of where we were at the same time last year with the undergraduate entering class. So that's good. But we still have to turn around graduate enrollment. But our price point, we're about $14,000 for annual tuition for the year, because that's how I use the endowment earnings to keep tuition low.
Right. What percentage of your students are international? It sounds like it's a pretty big chunk of your crowd
at the
there.
Graduate level, it would be probably about 50% at the graduate level. At the undergraduate level, it's less than that. We are I have my fact sheet right here. There you go.
Well prepared.
Yeah, well, only because I had a board meeting last week, so I needed to have it out. We are actually we're not a minority serving institution. We don't have that designation. We are considered an emerging Hispanic serving institution. And we are a minority majority institution. So 70% of our student body is non-white. And most of that 70% is going to be international students at that graduate level. But our Black and African American percentage is 23%. Hispanic Latino is 19%. And so, it just goes up 2 or more races, all that. So we are a minority majority institution, which is really cool when you walk across campus and you hear, people talking. From like one of my favorite students is from Sierra Leone, and it's like I just love hearing him talk because it's the cadence of their language is just so pretty to listen to.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic, terrific, and there's so much good that comes out of that kind of diverse environment for students, for everyone that's involved with the school. It's just absolutely fabulous. And we're growing here. We're working on it, and we're making good progress. But and already just in the last couple of years, could feel a change on campus, and it's a great feel.
Yeah.
It just reminds us. We were joking one day, like, how do you convince people that diversity is a good thing?
Yeah.
And my chief of staff, who's sitting back here, is a really, he loves to go to the bars and play trivia. That's his thing. He's always doing it. And it's the greatest example of how important diversity is that anybody can latch onto. Because if your team is all the same kind of people, you're not going to do that well
You're
at
not going to
trivia.
work.
But
No.
if you have a diverse group, age and race and gender and everything, you're going to be the winning group, right?
Yeah.
It's such a great way to illustrate that. Whenever I see him, I think about that because
Yeah. Well, and when you think
it's
about, like, you and I grew up in Oswego County, New York, that's not very diverse.
no.
And so for me, it's like a playground every day when I can be around a lot of different people and just learn from them. I don't know how much I have learned from, especially my students who will
Good.
say, "Oh no, that is not what we do in my country." Well, tell me what you do. And so they do. And it's been amazing to learn.
Mhm. Yeah, well, and it's not, that's exactly it. You learn and you're not even trying, right? It's
Right.
not like
Yeah.
it's painful to learn this in some way. It's not. It's a
No.
joy to find out how other people live and look at the world and experience different things. And they get that from you too. It's such a great sharing. And
Yeah.
it's something I wish that we could somehow, get people to appreciate more when they're sort of grousing about DEI and stuff these
I
days.
know.
I that it almost, I understand why it's happening, but it's
Sure.
almost a little confusing because our DEI work is about serving underserved populations and asking other people to treat each other with courtesy, grace, and care.
Mhm.
And who can object to that?
Right. Yeah.
And it produces this environment that you're talking about where, we're all just learning and preparing ourselves better to be in the rest of the world too.
Right. And we have in Wilmington, Delaware, Delaware is kind of the headquarters for international companies. And they're actually headquartered just maybe 4 miles from campus. And all they have is a post office box at the CSC Corporation, because that's where all that happens. But,
Uh-huh.
a lot of, you get a very, international group that's coming through because of being domiciled in the state of Delaware.
Mhm,
So they
mhm.
come every once in a while and visit. So I get to interact with a lot of, really pretty interesting people.
Yeah, yeah.
It's
That's great. Your alumni base must be pretty interesting to draw them back and do things as well
yeah,
because they're bringing the experience of having been an international student. And then, probably some stay, but many probably go back and
a lot
live
do go
their
back.
lives. Yeah.
Yeah, we
So,
haven't done a great job with our alumni affairs in general. I think they used to back in the 70s, but then they kind of lost it and focused in on just different things. So we always ran like a business, but not the business of higher ed. And
mm,
so the focus on fundraising and alumni affairs was just not really there. So that's part of what I have to rebuild now. And, we've been attacking that, but it's been slow going and COVID didn't help. But I'm feeling, we made some good progress this year and I think we'll make some good progress next year. But getting the alumni back is tough. So we're going to start really going out to them. And I've got especially our graduate students, because we used to do a Saturday program and now, and because of the international focus, a lot of that has to be face to face. But we do it hybrid. We meet all the government requirements for how much of their program can be online, how much has to be face to face and all that. But they come in from like New York City. They'll take the train into Wilmington and then Uber out to campus. They come up from Baltimore. So when they come to class, they're coming in from far away. So I figure what we'll do is we'll go out. So we'll start doing, an alumni something, happy hour or whatever in New York, and we'll do it in Baltimore. And, we'll go to them.
mhm.
And, plus it's kind of fun to take the train to those places.
Yeah, for sure.
I'll figure it out.
Yeah, no doubt, no doubt. I was going to ask you, you were talking about enrollment there, And some of the challenges, some of them are here already, some of
Yeah.
them are coming. This year has been, I'm sure it's been a wait for you, the problems with the FAFSA, the financial aid system. That's been almost debilitating. And, a lot of schools are, we're all on a president's listserv in several
On
of them actually.
CIC.
Yeah, with CIC, when I noticed you had posted on there that you've met your goals. That's great. But a lot of others are reporting that they're behind and they've delayed their deposit deadlines because of the FAFSA. So it's been a real challenge this year. Where do you see things going with that? How are you thinking about those enrollment issues, and what are some unique or interesting things that you're doing to try to address that problem? Because as you said before, I mean, it's the lifeblood. Even if you have a big endowment, if you don't have that enrollment flow, eventually you're going to get in trouble.
Right. Yeah. It's not going to last.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to do that. We've been really focusing in on expanding the footprint for where we're going to recruit and making sure that the curriculum is of interest. So we started at the graduate level and we're already seeing some success. But I remember saying to our current provost and the former provost, we had a retirement. And I said, we've got to, we're competing against like Eastern, who has a 9-month MBA. And, that's pretty attractive. So a 9-month MBA for $9,999, something like that. So I said, why can't we stack certificates? We live in a certificate world more than a degree world right now. So why can't we do a certificate in finance, a certificate in HR, a certificate in whatever, in 3 classes, 4 classes at a time at the graduate level, and let them be stacked into an MBA? And so that's what we started doing, and making sure that we can do them online. And I noticed on LinkedIn, so as soon as they finish their first certificate, they're immediately getting an electronic certificate and they're posting it. It's like, the first 3 classes of my MBA are done. I can stack certificates into this. And I'm like, yes, that's awesome. So we've stayed very close to the workforce folks, all the companies that hire our graduates. And we have a lot of banking around here. So there's JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Barclays Bank, Citibank, everybody's here. And people there are very interested in that type of thing because you can get something that gives you a credential. And then if you want to come back and add to that credential, you can do another certificate and stack them into a degree. So, and we do our, we're on a semester system, so we have a 15-week semester, but we also have 2 7-weeks within each one. And so you can, come in and out all year in that. And so we often have, students that'll come the first 7 weeks, they might sign up for 1 or 2 classes. They get toward the end of that, then they'll sign up for the next set in the next 7 weeks. So, we try to meet the demand for earning the credential as quickly as they can in that way. So we've changed up our curriculum to do that, and we'll start to do that at the undergraduate level, but it's harder to do at the undergrad level because of all the accreditation issues that you really have to focus on. It's a little easier at the graduate level. So we solved it there. But until COVID came, we didn't do anything online. So
no, interesting.
Yeah. So now we've embraced the online world, and we're building out things, but we had to change up our learning management system, kind of build the infrastructure so that we could do that. And that's been slower than I would have liked. But we also have a lot of long-term faculty members who were hired to teach face-to-face. Teaching online is not what they were hired to do, and it's not really of interest to them. So our provost has created a boot camp approach. And so we put the first 4 faculty members through the boot camp to design their classes to be taught 100% online asynchronously. And we paid them a stipend to go through this. So we put them through the boot camp. Now so all their classes are now able to be online. Now we're doing the second round of the boot camp. And we'll put the next 4 professors through that. And that has worked out better for our population of faculty because it's less threatening and we're not bringing in somebody, from the outside to come in and design our classes. We're designing them ourselves. But then, partnerships are the big thing. And the longer, gosh, 38 years in higher ed, in my 3rd presidency, it's like if you don't have strong partners to build on, that's really hard. Not necessarily mergers, but how can I work with another college? What are my strengths and what are their strengths, and how can I bring that together? So we've had some conversations with other places about that. We've got one going on now that, for a school that does a ton of online, and we don't have much overlap in the academic curriculum. So their strength in online is where our weakness is. So can we, come up with some concrete things that we could partner together on, and that would have a benefit for both of us? And sometimes the answer is, you can find something, other times you can't.
Yeah.
But being open to all of that.
Yeah. Oh, you have to. I mean, we got to reach out in different ways. We're in a changing world, and if we don't change with it, we're going to be in trouble. But I was wondering, I mean, one of the challenges I think we have with respect to online is how do you compete with these huge behemoths now that, they've got such big and efficient operations and scaled so large, they can get by on really thin margins and we can't, and so it's hard to compete with Southern New Hampshire or Grand Canyon. I mean, and these places, ASU, they're all in our backyard, getting students. Have you figured out an approach to that? Are you being successful with somehow sidestepping them or getting around them or something?
We have not figured it out yet, except what we are finding is when we are out talking to students, they don't like, they like the convenience of the Southern New Hampshire, the Arizona States, all that. But when they need help, they can't get they're not always able to find whoever it is that they need the help with. So what we're finding is that there's a market for people who want that high touch that we used to do, with the face-to-face. But, can we do it in the online world? And we've been able thus far to be successful with that. Now our numbers are still small. So, success, I guess, is relative. And we tried to offer our Masters of Arts in Counseling Psych online. And that was going very well. But the faculty were like, these people are not even logging into class and they're not turning their cameras on. And we don't want to send counseling psychologists out into the world who are not even logging, I can't see them when they're on the screen. They're not turning cameras on and all that kind of stuff. So we pulled it back and said, okay, we're going to do it face to face while we figure out a hybrid approach to it. And so I think they've got that figured out now so that the next entering class that we get at the graduate level will be able to have the classes online, but with some touch points where they need to come here to campus. And, we made sure we're in NC Sarah so that we can offer, online education everywhere. But it's hard. It's just hard to get that and to compete with that. But there is a market out there for people that don't really want that kind of, especially at the master's level, definitely at the undergrad level, but the master's level. Doctoral level is a little bit different. And we have a Doctor of Business Administration that we're actually in the process of sunsetting. We may bring it back, but when we do, it's got to be with a different kind of focus. So we're teaching out the people that are in there now, but they're a little more able to do it on their own. But master's level, they still need some touch points for the most part.
Yeah. Oh, and especially in a field like counseling. I mean, I'm tempted to just, well, if we're going to do that, there's going to be a requirement. They're going to have to sign the camera's on if I'm in this program, you maybe get away with it more in a computer programming environment or something like that, where they're, but counseling,
Yeah.
And especially because this is how people are doing counseling now, right?
Yes.
The telemedicine via Zoom is what it's all about. And,
Yeah.
so yeah, that's very, very important. Um, I was going to ask you, we were just thinking about this whole um, digital world and how we get into it in different ways and have it supplement our instruction, but it's also a tool for promoting our institutions using social media and digital advertising. How are you all going about that? Are you doing stuff with social media, or are those of us that doing? Are we crazy, or what are you doing over there?
Well, we have a whole digital marketing approach. We used an outside agency for the last, I think we're finishing up our 4th year now with them. Our goal was to learn how to fish. So we went with an agency out of Philadelphia and, built out a better program for, not just billboards, but online ads, social media presence, all that kind of stuff. And we learned a lot through that. So now we're pulling that back in-house. And we have, we're just now pulling it back in-house. So we'll bring in somebody to manage, to do a social media, they'll be our social media manager, and then a director of marketing that does that. We tend to, like, I use my personal social media a lot. I'm not on TikTok as like you are. I got to figure out that. But all the other things, and my biggest concern has been at the graduate level. So I use LinkedIn a lot, and we get a lot of hits from that. So, you got to do it all. So we're making sure that we're pushing information out on Instagram and TikTok for really more, well, undergrads for sure, but even a lot of the graduate students, Instagram's a big thing for them. And then, LinkedIn, Facebook. Facebook is really more parents and grandparents. That seems to be who, but that works very well because they're influencers. So we look at that. And then we try to capitalize on what's fun about the campus and, which we're small. So there's not, we don't have all the bells and whistles that a lot of places do. But, it's people have a pretty good time. And so I have found we are finding we're getting more hits from social media, and we track that so that we know that the ad that appeared or whatever appeared on Instagram, they clicked on something and that came directly to us. So we're actually getting a lot of the undergraduate population finding us that way and trying to stay on top of whatever the national conversation is and trends are and jumping in on that as soon as we can.
Yeah.
So
It's interesting. From talking to students, they really do pay attention to social media when they're picking schools.
Yes.
And they really purposely go there to try to see if they can figure out what it would feel like to be at that school. And, and so, for us, I mean, we make a lot of use. Well, we do everything we can, but we have really made a game out of TikTok, I think, and in various ways. But it's for fun, really. Every once in a while I'll have a series like, get your FAFSA in, don't give up, people, that kind of
wait.
thing. But others, just like we did a couple yesterday around graduation with me goofing around with my robe, because we wear these fancy, fancy garb. And so we did a couple of those will come out over the weekend and while we have graduation, but, and they're just fun and doing little dances or making jokes but you get out and do something with students. A lot of our ideas come from students that I'll do. They help you keep in touch,
Yeah. And we turn it over to students sometimes. Like we'll say, okay, Instagram takeover, the RA staff is going to do that this week. And so we turn it over to them and ask them to, just do what I don't censor it, whatever you feel is going to capture somebody's attention, do it, and that's okay. And, you got to trust them to make sure they're, and they've been pretty good.
You're living dangerously over there, Colleen.
I know. But, I'm around a lot. I live right now in the president's house, right next to the campus. I have 2 English bulldogs, so we're walking around all the time. And so I'm in touch with a lot of them.
Yeah, I've talked to a couple of presidents who really, the pet connection. It works so well for them. I'm
Oh,
tempted to get one myself, but I don't know if I could manage it.
yeah. And sometimes students are afraid of dogs. And so, our two are, my husband's a therapist. And so he does animal assisted therapy. So they go to work with him
Oh,
usually,
oh.
which just means they sit on the couch and get petted all day. So, that
Hey.
works, but they're very docile. And
Mhm.
so it works out well. And when I
Yeah.
walk them around campus, there have been times when I'll have students, usually girls, that'll say, "Can I take them for a while?" And I have no idea what Daisy and Charlie see in those res halls, but they go to the res halls.
That's great. I love that. And I was saying that we had another one a couple episodes back where the president was talking a lot about animals and how they work for them on their campus. And,
Yeah.
I was just saying, it's actually kind of a perversity of college campuses that there aren't pets around because people had them at home and then they're here and they don't, and they really miss them. And they're a big part of people's lives. You can't
Yeah.
forget that.
Within reason, we allow them on campus, and people will bring, like you'll see over in athletics, they'll have the athletic director and our softball coach often have their dogs here with them. And you'll see students hanging out over there and just petting the dogs, and,
Yeah,
it works. And as
yeah.
long as they're not tearing stuff up, I'm good.
Well, Colleen, this has been a lot of fun and a great conversation. But one of the things I love to do on this podcast is make sure we make the president into a real person.
Oh.
And you gave me some tips on that, but I want to go to one that not many people will have. You were the New York State Drum Major of the Year,
Yes.
1978, 1979, and 1980. Holy moly. How in the world did that happen? Tell me about your marching band experience.
It was, I have always loved music. And so my whole family, and music was a big thing at Altmar Parish, Williamstown. We used to have, because there wasn't much else to do there. And so we would have these huge bands back in our day. You might have 150 in the band and another 100 in the color guard and all that. So, you just were always involved in music. And I took piano lessons and all that as a kid. I played French horn and mellophone in band. And then you had marching band and you had concert band. And I'm tall, I'm 5'11". And so I remember, joining the band in junior high and realizing, I really like what they're doing. I like the concept of conducting and bringing, figuring out how the music works and all that. And I had a wonderful band director, Rod Jennings, who was just, beloved, and the family. They were a unique family and truly an outstanding, group to be around. And
Absolutely.
then my woman, Annette, her name was Annette Dager at the time. She was the drum major right before me, and she was a little bit older than me. So when I was in ninth grade, she was a senior, and she was graduating. And so I thought, I wonder if I could be the drum major. And Annette said, well, I don't know, but, Mr. Jennings picks them. So you'll need to go talk to him. So, and I was really afraid to go talk to him because I just didn't want to promote myself or anything like that. So I said, you know, I I really would kind of like to be the drum major. What do you think? And he said, I was going to come ask you because I think you'd be a great one. And
Uh,
so I started doing that, and it was just amazing. So my mother made my drum major costume, the outfit. So I had white, I have actually got pictures of it too. White pants with a blue stripe down the side, and then a white shirt and a sash and all this kind of stuff. And then I wore a cowboy hat with a big feather around it. And and the way you become the New York State Drum Major of the Year is you have to compete in the state competition at the state fair. So it's
ah,
not a separate competition. It's you out there with your band
I see.
doing what you do with the band. And I don't know how many bands were there. I'd probably 20, 25. It'd be kind of like if you went to, we used to go to the Sherburne Earlville pageant of bands in Sherburne, New York. And so it was the same group that was there was also over at this. And I think I was just kind of more of I wasn't really a show off, but I wanted to showcase the band and knew that if I could call attention to the band through what I did, that we would be successful. And so that's what I did. But yeah, I was 78, 79, and 80,
That
3
is
years in a row.
incredible. That's
And
awesome.
the high school still has my trophies.
That's great. That's great. I'm gonna make, well, so everybody knows out there that Rod Jennings Sr., who she's talking about, the band director, who was a fabulous person and an unbelievable teacher. He's one of those very special ones that challenges and supports everybody and pushes you, and you still love him to death.
Yes.
One of those people. But three of his sons, I'm in a band with them still to this very day. We still play real rock band, and I'm going to tell them to watch this. They're going to get a kick out of it because they love their dad so much. And he died relatively young. And
yeah, he did. And they really broke the mold after him. He was the kind of guy, you never forget him because he was so kind and could give you bad news and you would love him for it. And he cared. I remember one time the French horn section, I don't know what we were doing, but whatever it was, we were probably off the beat or something. And he came over and he turned the chair around and he sat down and it was all girls. It was my friend Sue and me and Christy. And so, we're all there. And he said, ladies, we got to get it together. And so he kind of gave a little bit of corrective feedback. And then he went back up to the, where he was conducting and he brought us in at the right time but he kind of refocused us. So I don't know what we were doing that day, but when he had to come do that in front of the band, I'm sure we were all mortified, but it was helpful and kind, and you wanted to do your best for him because he was just that kind of guy.
Yeah. Well, those kind of people are so powerful in your life.
Oh, they are.
They just give you this really special kind of role modeling. You want to be like that. You want to help others in the way that they did it, challenge people to do their best and to drive forward. And so I have many memories of him, and they're just fabulous memories.
Well,
even though I didn't have him for band, he was in my life in various ways.
Yeah.
And I got a lot from that,
Yeah. And I was surprised at the number of people from my high school who went into music education directly as a result of him. He was that much of a role model for people that APW had several who went into music education just because of Rod Jennings.
Yeah. He was a special guy. So it's always great to think about those people that influenced us along these pathways to where we ended up now in our lives. So it's been really fun to have this conversation with you, Colleen, and many great reflections on some of the stuff that's happening in higher ed these days and that we're all grappling with as we go forward. So thank you so much for
you're welcome.
Yeah. Folks, this has been another edition of Higher Edification, and we're so happy to have had you join us today. We'll look forward to the next episode. Until then, take care and do your best work out there. I'm sure Rod Jennings will be proud of you. Take care.
Thanks.